Shalom. Today we start the preparation for a Torah portion, Balak. Now some people read Balak with the previous Torah portion, Chukat. I'm going to keep them separate because they're two separate topics. And Balak has got a lot of insights that I want to share. So just to quickly recap, during Chukat we looked at the medicine, the remedy to the illness of leprosy, which is Yahweh's ordinances, his chukat, that is required for the people that will go through the 1,000 years and the people that will end up in the 8th millennium. And what we saw is that the 8th millennium will be similar to the 7th. It will be a place of desolation. It will be a place after the destruction of a war. So logistically there will be nothing and the people have to start all over again. Now the only difference is the change in the 7th millennium is that Satan will be bound. The change in the 8th millennium is that the king will be present and the city of Jerusalem will be established. And the people on the outside will go through the cycle of cleansing, and the cleansing of the leper process will start all over again, dealing with their fallen nature. So that's the end point of where we landed. Now this Torah portion is Balak. Now Balak asked Balaam, the son of Beor, to curse Israel. And the Moabites were afraid of Israel. Now from Moab, we get the gematria that points to the language that reveals the body of Messiah. The marriageable women, the body, the branch that spring off forth from all the language associates with the bride. And this study basically connects to Korah, which is the internal enemy that we found in one of the two camps in the 8th millennium called the family, and they are located in the area of Egypt. Now what we learn from Balaam, the son of Beor, is that through the meanings of those names, it's a link to Amalek, Edomite king. Now Edom is red. It also means Edomite, and it links to the descendants of Esau. And anything connected to Esau is the conflict between Esau and Jacob, which is the conflict over the birthright. The birthright is symbolized by the promises, the covenant, specifically symbolized by the Ark of the Covenant. We also saw last week that the Ark of the Covenant was the object that caused all the plagues in the land of the Philistines. And the promise that's associated with the Ark of the Covenant is basically what execute the judgment to remove anything that is opposite the promises of Yahweh. So if there's a plan and a promise that the enemy is making, and if it's different to Yahweh's plan and promise, if you bring the presence of Yahweh into that space, judgment will consume the promise and the plans of the enemy. Very, very, very powerful spiritual warfare concept that you need to be aware of. How is that? Because we are emotional beings. We are driven by fear. We are driven by what we see, and that is the issue that the 10 spies had. They saw the giants. They were like grasshoppers in their sight, and they feared. And then they came back with an evil report. Now, doing that, the plague that is associated with the promise that's opposing to Yahweh's promise was the evil report. And the people who had the evil report in their mouths, they were judged and they died in the wilderness. So you have to have the plan of Yahweh in your mouth, the promises in your mouth, because when you bring it into the presence of the covenant, or the covenant people, or the household of Elohim, that will cause judgment upon the people of Yahweh if they do not align themselves with the promises of the covenant. Very, very, very important information we saw last time. Now what we see here is a very interesting thing. I hope I can remember the name. Balaam was the son of Beor, and Beor is a Edomite king, or is the father of the Edomite king. So that means that Balaam was the Edomite king of the king of Edom. And the Moabites and the Edomites joined forces to come and destroy Israel. Not physically, but the spirit behind them is trying to do that. Now, there's one of the meanings of the gematria of Beor that means pearl of wisdom. And that name, I hope I can remember the name. I can't remember the name. I think it's Daraka or something like that. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That person was compared to Solomon as one of the 5 wise men associated with Egypt. And Solomon was superior to those 5 wise men. So he was one of the wisest men in Egypt, the pearl of knowledge. And that pearl of knowledge is found within the meaning of the gematria of Beor. And that pearl is also associated with the meaning pureness, to be pure. And when that word is first found in Exodus 30, that has to do with the pure ingredients for the making of the anointing oil. So now we see a connection with Balaam. Balaam was an anointed prophet, the son of Beor, who had the knowledge of the pureness associated with the anointing. He had the knowledge of the anointing, or he had access to the anointing. And that gave Balaam his abilities to prophesy, and it come to pass. But as I said previously, and in last week's study, we also saw that if your plan does not align, Yahweh will not give permission to it. He will stop that, and he will come in opposition with that. So what we saw in this storyline is that when Balaam prophesied, trying to curse Israel, it changed into a blessing. Yahweh changed the words coming out of him, or the anointing released through him in the form of words, were actually blessings that came upon Israel. So the twisting of the anointing, or trying to use the anointing for bad, will not work against Yahweh's righteous holy people, but it will definitely cause issues with false prophets being present in the presence of Yahweh's household. So I just want to leave you with those few thoughts. Very interesting to see the mechanics behind the scenes and where it comes from, and all the spiritual things associated with the people, and doing that and giving us a bit of insight into that, and then we extrapolate that into the timing and the context of the body of Mashiach in our time frame, and see what we need to be aware of, avoiding the tactic of the enemy through false prophets. So I'll leave you with that. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll speak to you soon. Shalom.